So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to pre-think assumptions. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar is Aarti. Aarti is a subject matter expert, and she's going to make sure all your subject matter doubts get answered as we proceed through this webinar. And then Sandeep, who's a GMAT strategy expert, and his job here would be to really answer any questions that you have about study plans. We do get a number of e-GMAT students and they do ask questions. So questions that are pertinent, he's going to make sure that he does answer those. Now, the goal of this webinar is to introduce you to this method called pre-thinking. This is a method that we pioneered about a decade back. We are in the third iteration of this method right now. And the different kinds of folks over here. There are some people who actually do pre-thinking now. For them, our goal would be to take them to that next level, help them do pre-thinking better, faster. There are a few folks who don't know how to go about doing pre-thinking. For them, my goal would be to introduce pre-thinking to them and to tell them how to get started on that journey and and tell them what are the various milestones they're likely to see. Either way, this is a fairly application focused webinar, and to just make sure that you get the most out of it, we did want you to go through a few video lessons. One was on introduction to assumption, and the other was pre-thinking logical gap. Now, if you were able to do this, that's great. If you were able to go through these video lessons, that's wonderful. But in the event that you weren't able to go through them, they are a part of your free trial. You can just log into e-GMAT.com and you should see them front and center. All right. We also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free quant workshop that is tomorrow. If you click on this, you can register for that. Think of this quant workshop as a proctored mock test in which we do a few things. We give you a really good estimate of where you currently stand. In addition to that, we also tell you what's stopping you from reaching your target quant score. And then we kind of give you that sequence of study, or what I call as a personalized study plan for that. So that's tomorrow, 24 hours from now. And then a week from now, we have a sentence correction webinar. In this webinar, we talk about the famous meaning-based approach that we pioneered again a decade back when we launched the company, and we're going to really demonstrate how using that approach you can solve pretty much any question that the test is going to throw at you. So you can click on these links to register for these webinars. Okay, with that, I have about 170 odd students here. I'd like to know more about you. I mean, when do you guys plan to take the GMAT? And then let's get to know more about your target GMAT scores. So based on the data that I have over here, you can see that about the biggest segment here, 33% of you have not taken a data as of yet. That's about 70 of you. Then you have the next big segment is those who have upwards of a month and a half before they take their test. And then other than that, we have about between 11 and 18% of folks in each and every segment. With regards to the target GMAT score, over here, a big group aiming for that perfect 99th percentile or better. That's about 21% of you. A really big group in that 730 to 750 segment, which is what I call as a sweet spot. A big group also in that 710, 720, and about 17% of you are in that 600 to 700 segment. Let me hide these. And then, one thing that I encourage you guys to do is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Studying for the GMAT requires that you stay motivated, and we post, probably we post about 3 success stories a week over there. So I think it's a great way to just stay motivated. I know when you're feeling down, you can look at a success story, how they aced the GMAT, how they got into a certain B school, how they attained scholarships. It just keeps you going that way. With that, let's go right into our presentation pod. What you see over here is a presentation, and very soon you'll start seeing what we call as a Q&A pod, or a question and answer pod, right below the presentation. Let me resize that. So during the presentation, so one thing that I want is, we have about 200 students here in the webinar. I want to make sure that that each one of you gets supported. But to get the most out of this webinar, and this webinar is going to be about 2 hours from this point on, I want to make sure that we stay on point. So during the webinar, ask good questions, ask questions that are pertinent to what we're talking about. And so that way both Aarti and Sandeep can respond to those questions. And then post this webinar, once this is done, if you have questions uh, that are a bit more personal to you, that may require us to get a bit more insights from you, in that case, wait till the end of the webinar. I do reserve some time to answer such questions. Okay. There's just 3 parts to this webinar. This is where the core of the webinar will take place over here, which is the live session, and this is the where I reserve time post this webinar to answer questions that are a bit more personal to you. But before that, I want to just talk briefly about your MBA over here, and just about how do you get to that 730, 750, 760, 770 score. If you're aiming for that high GMAT score, and if you want to get there efficiently, when I say efficiently, in the next 2 months, in the next 3 months or so, you've got to personalize your learning. And the best way to do that is to really understand what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and study as if you're working with a private tutor, and which is kind of what we strive to do with our learning architecture over here. So let's kind of talk about how do you get to that score of 720 or higher. At a very high level, this is what you do. You first of all visualize that path towards that goal. Given your strengths and weaknesses, understand which are the areas that you're strong in, understand which are the areas that you're weak in. Get a good estimate of how much time would it take for you to fix those weaknesses, and so create that path towards that goal. Visualize that path. Have good defined metrics for that. Once you have that, and this seems like a lot of work, but once you have that, that's when you start learning. You learn all the concepts that you need to learn. But just knowing concepts isn't enough. You need to learn how to apply those concepts efficiently. This webinar is about applying those concepts, and you need to get so good at applying those concepts that you get to that 90th percentile or 99th percentile or better, so that you attain that level of mastery. Okay, so let's see, how do you define that part to that goal? I'm going to take a simple case study. How do you go from that 600 to that 720 score? The same method could be applied to someone who aims for that 750, 770, or if you're aiming for that 690, the same method, the same architecture would work for you. So again, how do you build that study plan? First of all, figure out where you are, and a metric of figuring out where you are is to quantify your starting abilities in the 5 subsections that the GMAT evaluates you on. And those are, 3 subsections in verbal, that's SC, CR, and RC, and then 2 in quant, which is, arithmetic and algebra geometry. Then for each of these subsections, you define milestones that you need to reach, and then this is where a sort of optimization happens, which these milestones need to be personalized based on your natural affinity, your strengths, and your weaknesses. So that's kind of that defines the route you want to get to that you want to take to get to that 730, 740, 770 score. And then once you have these milestones defined, once you have these starting abilities, both these then actually give inputs into personalizing, whether you start learning concepts, whether you start learning application, whether you start practicing questions over there. So that's where you're personalizing that learning over there. So how do you get those starting abilities? If you don't know your starting abilities, if you've not taken the actual GMAT, one way to do that is to take a Sigma X mock. It's the only mock test in the world that will give you those starting abilities over there. I'm going to actually share some links as well on this. Then how do you set those milestones? We actually help you set those milestones. We have an AI-driven tool in which once you put in those starting abilities, it creates those personalized milestones for us. It actually looks at for each one of you about 50 to 70 combinations of those target milestones and then gives you the most optimal one. Not only that, it also, so this is kind of how it works. It takes in those current scores. So this is your quant and verbal score, and then it recommends a target score to get to that 720 score. You can see a Q50, V38 over here. And then not only that, it also tells you what abilities should you aim for to get to that. Now, these 5 values are personalized to every individual over here. So if 3 different people were to get to that 720 score, these values may be different for all 3, maybe drastically different for all 3. Okay. Um, then it tells you, depending on what your starting abilities are, here is where you see the starting abilities. It tells you how long would you need to get to that target ability that you see over here. And this is an estimate that we have based on, data from about 50 or 1,000 students. So upfront, you guys know how much effort you need to put in, where you need to put in that effort, what metric are you aiming for. Again, you can see the starting and target milestones and the time per subsection. And then it creates that plan for you. And while it creates that plan, it actually looks at how much time are you going to put in. I know you guys can't probably see this. It's too hazy, but this looks at the amount of time you can put in on a weekday, on a weekend. In fact, you can customize this time for every day. You can see there's a calendar view over here. You can click on this and you can customize this time for every day over here. So yeah, we created this so that each one of you can get that personalized study plan over here. So you can click on this and you can click on the GMAT study plan over here, and then that's also for the mock test. You can do that. Okay, and as you go to our YouTube channel, you can really see some folks who have used this utility to improve in a short duration. Why? Because they were able to figure out where they need to focus their energy on. Also, feel free to connect with me on my LinkedIn. We post about 5 articles every week on LinkedIn, and you can also connect with students at other B schools. I have further 16,000 students who are connected with me, from 16,000 students from top B schools who are connected with me. Okay, with that, let's go to the core of this webinar. And so here's a good question. It says, Gauri says, I recently started the e-GMAT course. I'm in SC stage 1, which is a stage of learning. Should you be attending these webinars? Gauri, don't attend this webinar. I would recommend, you focus on SC, attend the SC webinar next week is all I would say. But great question, Gauri. Very relevant question. All right. So with that, let's kind of talk about how are we going to do this. So we're going to talk about your current approach, and let me clean the screen up. We're going to talk about your current approach over here, which is how do you approach assumption questions today. Then we're going to do a pre-thinking exercise where we're going to go through a few arguments. In this, we're going to lay the foundation of how to go about doing pre-thinking. So the first argument is going to be a very simple argument. You'd get no instruction from me. You'd do it by yourself. It's a simple one. It's something that's very close to your heart. The second argument, a bit more complex. The third is going to be a full-length question over here in these 3 arguments. The goal really is that we build that pre-thinking skill throughout these arguments as we do this. Now, some of you would start getting pre-thinking right away. Others would need, 2 examples. Some of you would need 3 examples before you start appreciating pre-thinking. So that's kind of the goal of this agenda item over here. Then by the end of that third question, each one of you should start to feel comfortable with that notion of pre-thinking, and we're going to then apply this on 2 very difficult questions. And these are very, very difficult questions. I tell you up front, these are probably the most challenging assumption questions that you're going to see. These are official questions, so these are not e-GMAT questions. And we're going to make you apply pre-thinking on these, and some of you might say, hey, this is a recipe for failure. Yes, I think it's also a recipe for learning. You're going to learn a lot about the extent of clarity that pre-thinking can provide, even when the question is this challenging. If you do it well, some of you would be able to really see the answer right then and there. Others who make mistakes will be able to see how, if you do pre-thinking well, the answer seems to be just right then and there. And you'd see it kind of, these 2 questions will expose those kinks in your pre-thinking process, which you'd be able to then work towards. And then we're going to go over here, because this is life doesn't end here. We want to then talk about what should you do next. How can you master pre-thinking from this point on? We'll talk about your should be approach. We'll give you more places where you can practice, and then after this, you guys can do that and be skilled pre-thinkers. So at a very high level, we're going to document how you prepare today. We're going to recognize what's important to master assumptions, and then going to give you a path forward. Okay, so let's talk about your current CR approach. And I'm going to put in a poll here which says which methodology do you follow. But before that, I want to make sure that you understand what is pre-thinking. Pre-thinking, a lot of people say they do pre-thinking and without knowing what exactly is pre-thinking, because even though those terms existed for quite some time in the blogosphere, um, people didn't define it properly. Pre-thinking was considered to be predicting the answer. No, pre-thinking is not about predicting the answer. Pre-thinking is not about figuring out what is it that the test takers were thinking when they created that question. Pre-thinking is about understanding the author's logic. And so a precise definition is pre-thinking is about thinking one potential assumption in your mind, and a skilled pre-thinker does that in 15 seconds. And you do that before you look at any answer choices, which means before your mind gets, polluted by the extra information that's there in answer choices. And it's really important to focus on these three things, each one of them over here. An argument can have multiple good assumptions. We are only worried about one. Why? Because once you get one, you understand the logic. The moment you see another potential assumption which is there in the answer choices, your brain will instantly recognize it. If you understand the argument well, you should be able to do it in 15 seconds. Our students who've done it well, a good number of them are able to do it in about 10 seconds. Some of you may be thinking it's very short. 10 seconds, 15 seconds is a lot of time in thinking dimension over there. And you need to do it before you look at answer choices. And we were the first company to define this. We actually probably are the only company that defines it this precisely over here. Again, as I said, it's not about predicting the answer. Don't think. If you pre-think, you're going to see whatever you pre-think is going to be there in the answer choices. That's the wrong expectation. There is a possibility it would be there, but there's also a possibility it may not be there. So with that, let's kind of ask which methodology, how do you approach assumption questions today? And here's a poll question. Why don't you put in the answer? Which methodology do you follow? The first is you read the argument, you go to the answer choices, and you do that back and forth between the argument and the answer choices till you reach this final candidate. And the second is you read the argument, you pre-think. Again, you're not looked at the answer choices, and then you look at the answer choices, you evaluate each one of them, and you come back to the argument only if you need to verify something. Over here, methodology 1 versus methodology 2. Let's broadcast the results, and you can see about 46% of you choose methodology 1. Again, this is not the pre-thinking method. This is the pre-thinking method. Methodology 2 is the pre-thinking method. Okay. Yes, and you can see about half and half over here in this case. That's great. Ria has a great question. Ria says, is it okay to have a pre-thinking that's different from others? Yes, and you would see that in practice in this webinar itself. It's okay to have a different pre-thinking. In this webinar, my pre-thinking would be a lot different than yours, or than some of your pre-thinking over here. And that's okay as long as it is a precise pre-thinking. Pre-thinking or an assumption is a very precise statement as long as you achieve that level of precision, as long as it passes the litmus test that we have for a valid assumption. That's okay. Okay. Now, pre-thinking doesn't happen automatically. It's an outcome of you having a few skills. The first thing which is there is the ability to visualize the conclusion. So Harsh says, in some questions, I'm not able to think of any potential assumption. How do you handle that? That's a symptom. The fact that if you're not able to handle a potential assumption, it's a symptom that you weren't able to understand the conclusion. You did not visualize the conclusion. And let me just explain what visualizing the conclusion means. Visualizing means you read the conclusion, you look at pertinent modifiers, you look at relative pronouns over there, and an image of what the author is saying in the conclusion, the claim that the author is making, forms in your brain. And it's a skill that you need to build. And when you do it for the first time, because most of you naturally don't do this. If you were doing it, you probably would be very good in pre-thinking, which means you probably would not be in this webinar at this point. So this is a skill that you need to build. Building the skill will require time. So which is why As you start doing pre-thinking, some of you will struggle, some of you will take longer. Why? Because either you're not doing this or doing this takes longer. So, but identify the conclusion, read it, visualize it. The worst thing that you can do while doing pre-thinking is to read an argument and say, hey, what is the answer? Don't ask what is the answer. Ask yourself, what is the author saying? Then ask yourself, what logic does the author use? Because the author is a sensible person in an argument. He doesn't, his logic is very sound. So understand the logic, the reasoning that the author uses, the justification that the author has provided, the facts that justify that conclusion. Understand that linkage over here. And again, visualize that as well. And then once you have that, there's a very simple thing called a falsification question that will teach you how to formulate. It's a process, which means if you do this well, if you do this well, this is very, very simple. This part is then very simple. You formulate the falsification question, the assumptions start coming right in front of you. Okay. So that's what we're going to focus on. Okay. With that, let's kind of understand what an assumption is. And let's just I'm going to put a short answer pod. It's even though it says please enter your pre-thinking, this is an open-ended question. So tell me, what is an assumption? What is an assumption? I'm going to remove broadcast results, so you're not going to see what you're entering, but trust me, the information is coming through. Once I broadcast results, you're going to be able to see what others have written, what you've written, and so on and so forth. The question is, what is an assumption? Three, two, and one. About 47 responses. Let me broadcast results. Something which must be true but unstated. That's good. An unstated reasoning in the passage. That's kind of accurate but not precise. It's necessary but not sufficient. And a more precise way of saying that is using facts to derive a conclusion. No, an assumption doesn't need to always be facts. A link between the conclusion and the premise. Agreed, it's necessary. Again, not sufficient over there. Something necessary for the conclusion to hold true. Okay, that's closer. Again, not complete, but still closer. But so you guys kind of know what an assumption is. It's just you're not able to precisely say that. Now, to do that, I'm going to actually give you an example which is really close to your heart, and an example that that I think you'd be able to just nail this one. So here is, I'm going to again remove broadcast results, and here is an argument. The argument says Joe scored 500 on the GMAT, therefore he will not get admission in an Ivy League college. So can you guys tell me, what does the author assume over here? Can you put in your pre-thinking? All right, I have 32, 36, 41, 45. Let me broadcast results. Okay, and you can see some really good assumptions. The author assumed that 500 is not accepted, not the accepted score by Ivy League colleges. Ivy League schools require more than a score higher than 500. None of the Ivy admit folks that scores of 500. So again, really good answers. And this is an example of, once you're able to visualize that conclusion, once you understand the logic, coming up with assumptions becomes a very natural exercise. And this is an example of an argument where you do that. Okay, so what's given to us? If you look at this first data point over here, it's a fact. It's a data point. There's Joe has scored 500. And then the author then makes this jump, or takes a leap of faith, and really makes his conclusion, makes his prophecy, where he says he will not get into an Ivy League college. He makes that prediction over there. And you really say, okay, what makes the author make that prediction? What information does he have? What hidden information does he have that he's not telling me, based on which he's making that conclusion? And that's your assumption over here, that a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is unacceptable to Ivy League college. And pretty much consistent with what you're saying. There's just one little difference over here. There's someone like Joe in this case. And where does this come from? It comes from this conclusion where he's talking about he will not get into an Ivy League college. He's not saying that the Prince of Saudi Arabia will not get in. But again, you guys got the logic right. Okay. So with that, what is an assumption? An assumption is an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to be valid. The whole purpose of writing an argument is to further the conclusion. There's no other reason to write the argument. And so when the author makes that claim, a conclusion is always a claim, a prediction, or a causality that's made in over here. So a conclusion is always a claim. And the author justifies his conclusion in good official arguments. The author justifies his conclusions with facts. But while doing that, he doesn't list a certain set of facts over there. And those facts that are required for that conclusion to be true are what we call as assumptions over there. Okay, the prior case was one such example. Okay, so which means a good assumption has two characteristics. One is it must satisfy that must be true test, which is that it needs to be true, otherwise there's a means to break that conclusion or invalidate that conclusion. The second is you should not be able to infer that the information in that assumption from the factual part of the argument. And then I emphasize that from the factual part. Why? Because you would find there are certain cases, and very rare, but 3% of all arguments, a certain answer choice, correct answer choice in a question, whether it's assumption, strengthen, weaken, or evaluate question, would seem to go against the facts and against the information in the argument. And sometimes that's okay as long as it's going against the secondary claims in the argument and not the factual part. Okay. Now, if you were to visualize this, at e-GMAT, we're very big in visualizing things. If you were to visualize this entire thing over here, think of this house as your argument, where this conclusion is a roof. Now, what you see over here is you have these multiple supporting statements that make the conclusion, make this roof stay upright. Now, each one of them makes the conclusion stronger. It increases your belief in the conclusion, or in other words, it increases your belief that the roof is going to stay strong. But not every statement is necessary to keep the roof upright. Only one statement, maybe this middle one, is required to keep the roof upright. Yes, and that statement, that essential pillar, is an assumption. Now, this is in a visual way. Just remember this. Why? Because going forward, as we do certain official questions, you would see certain answer choices that are tempting. Anyone's been in that scenario, solving an assumption question and see multiple tempting answer choices over there? Yes. Those tempting answer choices are typically these pillars. The third argument that we do will have about 3 such tempting answer choices over there. These are what we call as strengtheners, which means that they make the conclusion stronger, but they are not required to keep the conclusion to hold the conclusion true. Okay, those are supporting statements. These supporting statements do not satisfy the must be true constraint typically, and this is something that we're going to learn in this session. Okay, so what does must be true mean? Must be true means that if the information provided by the assumption is not true, then the conclusion cannot hold true, or which is why we call it must be true, which means the assumption must be true for the conclusion to remain valid, or for the conclusion not to be destroyed. Now, this is where each one of you is slightly different. Some people like to think, when they think about pre-thinking, they really like to ask the question, what must be true? Some people are more destructive. Some people like me are more destructive, and they really say, how can I destroy the damn conclusion? And when they do that, assumptions start coming to them. And figure out what works for you. I mean, each one of you has grown in in a different environment. Each one of you has developed a certain thought process, and one thought process may work better for you than the other. So if you like to break things and tinker with things, and you've been thinking how to break things all your life, or for a significant part of your life, this thought process may work better. On the other hand, if you've been a savior, then this thought process might work better. But again, different people, different thought processes work for different people. I've seen that happen. So let's kind of understand, what does destroying the conclusion mean? Okay, same argument over here. How can this conclusion be destroyed? How can this conclusion be destroyed? Any idea? This conclusion can be destroyed if Joe gets admission in an Ivy League college with a score of 500, right? Everyone agrees? If Joe gets admission with this score of 500, then the conclusion falls apart. The author is falsified, right? So this is what we call as falsification of conclusion. So how do you figure out, when you're evaluating an answer choice which is given to you, whether that answer choice is correct? Let's look at this particular answer choice over here and really see how do we evaluate that. This is something that we all came up with, and I said this is the correct assumption. You apply what is called as the negation test, and we're going to really learn how to do that. So this is the answer choice, a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is unacceptable to Ivy League colleges. You ask this question, is it must be true, which means will Joe get admission if the statement to the left, which is this particular statement, no longer holds true. So here is something that you need to know. If we say that this statement no longer holds true, what we are also saying by definition is that its negated instance now becomes true. So what is the negated instance of this statement? It is essentially this statement over here, which means the score of 500 for someone like Joe is acceptable to Ivy League colleges. And then you ask yourself, does this conclusion break down when the score of 500 becomes acceptable? The answer is absolutely yes. If it's acceptable for someone like Joe, then I as an author cannot be 100% certain that Joe will not get admission into an Ivy League college, which means my conclusion breaks down. Okay, this is what we call as applying the negation test. Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, how can you really say that when I say a statement is not true, its negated version automatically becomes true? I'm also saying that its negated version is true. How many of you are thinking of that? How does that work? If you say a statement is not true, by definition, you're also saying its negated version is true. Okay, a few of you are saying that. I have one person saying me, yes, okay. So let's kind of take some examples over here, okay? Let's take this statement. The statement says Harvard has the best MBA program. If you say that statement is not true, by default, what you're also saying is that Harvard does not have the best MBA program, which is kind of the easier negated version. Or another inference that you're drawing is that an MBA program that is either better than Harvard or just as good as Harvard exists, right? Right? If you're saying this is not true, then by default, you're also saying this part over here. So when you say a statement is not true, you are by default saying its negated version becomes true. Okay. Let's look at a second example. John runs faster than David. If you say that's not true, what you're saying is not only that John does not run faster than David, you're also saying that David is just as fast, or David could also be faster than John. Okay. Again, the same thing. Right? Same thing. And even though both these statements are comparative, if you just take statements that are not comparative, even then the same would true. The same would hold true over there. Okay. So why does this must be, or where does this must be true come from? It comes from the definition of an assumption. Why? An assumption is an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to be valid. Now, one thing that I'm going to really tell you is remember this definition, memorize this, understand this, not just memorize, but understand this over here. Why? Because there will be times when you're confused. You go back to this. A lot of stuff in critical reasoning is, and for lack of a better comparison, it's like physics or economics. in many ways. And so, which means if you once you understand the principles, you can pretty much answer any question. I mean, I understand Newton laws, I understand materials, I can pretty much design any bridge over there. It's that puristic. Okay. Um, it also works the other way, which is that if an answer choice is the incorrect answer choice, which means it's not the correct assumption, then this will not happen. The conclusion will not break down in the presence of the negated version of that answer choice. Okay, so let's kind of see that over here. Let's take an example. Here's an answer choice that we're going to evaluate. And say a score of 500 on the GMAT is not a good score. And you have to say, hey, is this a correct answer choice? So we go through the same process. We say, hey, is this must be true? Will the conclusion become invalid if this statement no longer holds true? So let's take the negated instance. So when you negate this, you say score of 500 on the GMAT now becomes a good score. And then you say, okay, does my conclusion break down? Will Joe get admission? And the answer is not really. Why? Because when you look at this argument, this conclusion over here is not predicated on the fact as to whether a score of 500 over here is qualified as a good or bad score. So even when you can make it a good score, an excellent score, even then author's claim doesn't go away. He says, hey, you scored a specific score, which is why you're not going to get into an Ivy League college. Okay. In other words, you could replace this 500 by 700. The conclusion will remain the same, or the logic will remain the same as well. Okay. Uh, we're not going to look at that, but you'll have this over here. But again, the thing which would make it very easy is if you learn how to do things slowly, if you learn how to visualize the conclusion, because we're going to kind of just up the ante right now, and I'm going to give you an argument, and I'm going to ask you to come up with assumptions on your own. So first, identify the conclusion as you're doing that, and again, we're not going to talk about answer choices because I'm not going to have answer choices. But then go towards understanding what is the logic that the author uses. And then we've not talked about the falsification question, but we're going to talk about it right after that example as to how do you formulate that falsification question. But try doing 1 and 2 for the next for the next example over here. Okay, but just the benefit of must be true, it helps you narrow down. For the correct answer choice, the conclusion will break down. For the incorrect answer choice, the conclusion would not be impacted. It will continue to hold true. Okay, so again, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to give you a proper argument, a GMAT-like argument right now. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to put in your pre-thinking. There will be no answer choices over there. It's just your pre-thinking. Then I'm going to show you how I go about doing pre-thinking for this. So we're going to really understand the pre-thinking process over there. The difference is the first argument, simple argument, something that's very close to your heart, so you could visualize it right away. This argument is going to require some effort visualizing over there. So I want you to put in that effort, and I'm giving you ample time over there. So go slow. Okay, and then we're going to evaluate your submission over here. So 1, 2, and 3. Let me clear the short answer part. This is where you're going to put in your assumptions. Here is your argument over there. Good luck, guys. And I'm going to mute myself for about 2.5 minutes so that you have ample time to go through this. Okay, another 20 seconds, put those answers in. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Let me broadcast the results so you guys can read the assumptions that you guys are pre-thinking assumptions that you guys have come from. You can really see first of all, when you see this, I think each one of these answers is slightly different, and that's something where you can see for a very confined argument. I won't call it a simple argument because it isn't a simple argument, but for a confined argument, you can see how many different opinions can come out in a short span of time. The second thing that I want to do is I want to congratulate you guys and I want to applaud you guys for putting in those answers. Why? Because it takes guts to do this. It takes guts to really say, I'm going to try and do this. So I have about 65 responses here, and I appreciate the kind of active participation you guys have shown. When you participate, you put a stake in the ground. When you put a stake in the ground, you learn. If you correct, you give yourself a pat on the back. If you're wrong, you really say, okay, where did I go wrong? And either way, you move further along the process, and that's good over here. So here is the process that we're going to go through. We're going to understand what the conclusion is. We're going to visualize that conclusion over there and just focus just on it. So we're going to visualize that conclusion in isolation. Then we will understand how did the author arrive, what reasoning, what data point has the author provided for me to really just make this conclusion be a logical conclusion. And then we're going to ask this pre-thinking question that is over here. And as I do that, you will see assumptions start coming out. Okay. So again, remember I said, when it comes to this, it always stems down to that definition of an assumption. An assumption is an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. So which means that without the assumption, there are ways in which I can falsify or break the conclusion. So think about that house visualization where we had, if you were building that roof was the conclusion, right? If you were building that roof and you had to figure out where to put in pillars, what would you do? You will figure out where is it that the roof is caving in. And once you figure out where the roof caved in, you would put a pillar over there. That's kind of how we go about designing houses at a very coarse level. Okay. The same thing is what we do when it comes to designing assumptions or coming out with assumptions. We kind of figure out the scenarios where the conclusion breaks down. Once we figure out those scenarios, what we really just do is we say, hey, let's build assumptions around them so that those scenarios don't happen. Okay. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? To figure out an assumption, figure out where does the conclusion break down. Why? Because the job of an assumption is to prevent that conclusion from breaking down. Once you figure out where the conclusion breaks down, all you have to do is say, hey, that scenario is not possible because my assumption says so. Okay. So the pre-thinking question, which is what we call as the falsification method, is under what circumstances, given the facts in the argument, does the conclusion break down? Write this down. This is a question that you're going to ask for every assumption question, regardless of whether the conclusion makes a prediction about the future or whether the conclusion talks about attributing a causality. It doesn't matter. You're going to ask the same question. Also, you're going to use this as you go from assumption to evaluate. Pre-thinking encompasses all of CR, whether it's strengthen, weaken, evaluate, assumption, logically completes, even boldface over there. Okay. So let's kind of go about doing this, and I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to ask you guys a very simple question. Which statement over here is the main conclusion? And I'm going to give you a poll. That poll will have 4 statements. Please don't worry about statement number 4. I reuse this poll. Choose options 1, 2, or 3 only. Which statement, in your opinion, is the main conclusion. And this is a litmus test. That's the kind of feedback that each one of you needs, that personalized feedback. And you can see 1, 2, and 3 over here. Again, let's get a bit more participation before I broadcast results. Which statement do you think is the main conclusion? I have about 62 responses over here. I'd like to see about 100 responses. I have 201 students here in the webinar. 88, 89, 92, 96, 98, 105. Perfect, thank you. And you can really see a majority of the class, 54% of you think statement 2 is the main conclusion, and you are correct. Statement 2 is the main conclusion. But what you also see is about 46% of you were not able to get to the main conclusion properly. It's just one of the first steps towards this. So what is a conclusion? A conclusion is what the author asserts. A conclusion is what the author wants to prove in this argument. And so when you look at what does the author want to prove here, it is clearly statement number 2, where the author is saying that the reason why there is a difference between professors in the tenure system and other full-time lecturers, it is because of the reward system for these guys over here, okay, the professors. And then, so that's kind of what the author wants to say. Let me just hide this poll. The author does not doubt the validity of the data in that research paper. And then this piece over here, statement 3, is the additional information that the author provides to justify statement 2, which is his main claim over here. Okay, so let's just visualize this conclusion. What the author is saying is, hey, I agree the difference exists. And he says, but the reason why that difference exists is because of how professors in the tenure system, they are rewarded. It's the reason that blame that reward system for the professors in the tenure system. Can everyone now visualize that conclusion? Can everyone visualize that conclusion? This is what's happening just in the conclusion. It's like, hey, the reward system seems like it's is what's causing the fact that the teaching impact is not as much as that of lecturers. Okay, and again, the key thing over here is the author is not disputing the report's findings. He's just saying blame the reward system for the outcome. Another piece that a lot of people say is they look at this word concludes and say statement 1 must be the conclusion. For those folks who think because of the word conclude, statement 1 should be the conclusion, remember the conclusion is always by the author of the argument. This word concludes is by the paper. We don't care what someone else concludes. What we care about is what is the author claiming? What is the author trying to make you believe? And when you look at this, it's this statement 2 over here. Okay, so just the logic of the argument. What really happened was in statement 1, we were given this factual piece of information, okay, where it says, hey, there's this paper which says that tenured professors enhance student learning less than full-time lecturers. So if I were to visualize this statement, what I'm really saying is when it comes to comparing between two entities, full-time lecturers and tenured professors, full-time lecturers seem to do a better job with regards to enhancing student learning. And this is the key part over here. And then the author really says that the reason why this happens is because of the reward system for the professors that exists. And then the author provides more information on that reward system, where he says that the criteria for rewarding these guys, that tenured faculty, places a greater emphasis on research. So there's the reward system plays a 70% emphasis on research. So whenever you really see a comparative word, always go into hyper visualization mode. Greater is a comparative word. You say greater emphasis on research, just make up numbers. Greater has to be more than 50%. So just say 70% on research and 30% on teaching. Visualization clear, guys? Just can you see a more clear picture of what the author is trying to do? Okay. And that's the level of clarity that you need to be before you even get to asking that pre-thinking question. Now, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about statement number 3 over here, and I want to ask this one question, which is that whose reward system does statement 3 talk about? And I want to be very, very clear. Is it just the tenured faculty? Is it just lecturers, or is it both? Whose reward system does statement 3, this statement over here, talk about? I'm going to just clean up the annotations so that you can read this better. Okay, is it just the tenured faculty? Is it just the lecturers, or is it both tenured faculty and lecturers? So read this over here. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. Again, the majority is correct. 82 of you say it's just the tenured faculty, and that is true. We only know about the reward system for tenured faculty over here from this. Okay, we don't know anything about the reward system for lecturers. Okay, for those of you who say both, you again see where you're making a mistake in reading. The statement says the criterion for rewarding tenured faculty places greater emphasis on research than on teaching. And you say, hey, is there anything about lecturer? No, this word greater in this case is comparing the comparative emphasis on research versus teaching just for this entity. He's not saying anything about lecturers. Let me hide this. For those of you who chose both, did you read the statement again? And can you really see there's nothing about lecturers that's been communicated over here? Okay. So then let's kind of formulate that falsification question, which says, and which is again the same architecture. Under what circumstances, given the facts in the argument, will the conclusion break down? Which is, under what circumstances would the reward system not be responsible for the difference in performance? Again, remember, we're not disputing the difference in performance. What we are really saying is, under what circumstances should we not be blaming the reward system for the difference in performance, given that full-time lecturers enhance student performance more than professors do? We know that, we agree with that, and we know that the reward system for professors places a greater emphasis on research than on teaching. So what we are really saying is, under what circumstances can we not blame the reward system? Okay. So this is what, yes, and I got a good answer. If both got the same reward system, in that case, you can't blame the rewards. Yes. The possible scenarios is, if the non-tenured faculty has an identical reward system or a very similar reward system, then you can't blame the reward system, right? Another scenario which is there is, if tenured faculty, they have a reward system, but they don't care about it. A majority of them don't act as per the reward system. And you can really see, even before I gave this to you, you guys were able to come up with these breakdown scenarios. So many of you like to break things down, apparently. All you need is a good framework, right? So if these are the scenarios in which the conclusion breaks down, then the assumptions simply are that non-tenured faculty, that does not have an identical reward system, and most professors should actually care about the reward system. Can you see, once you ask the right question, things become so simple. Once you visualize that conclusion, visualize that argument, life is simple. These things just come naturally out of the argument in a manner which is very similar to what we did with the Joe argument over there. Can you see that? Yes, no? Again, assumptions are they're opposite of breakdown scenarios. Remember, breakdown is where the roof comes in, and an assumption is a pillar that prevents the roof from coming in. So good question. So these are breakdown scenarios or falsification scenarios, and these are simply saying that those scenarios should not be possible. Okay. Garios, does that make sense? We talked about this. So let's talk about this, the elephant in the room, which is, what do we do about timing? Okay. What do we do about timing? How many of you are concerned about timing? You say, man, this is great. It seems very logical, but it seems it's going to take a lot of time. Okay. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is what I see as this part over here, which says timing is the main issue. In this case, Akshay says that, and I don't blame you guys for thinking timing is the main issue, because a lot of people really propagate that timing is the main issue, because how they sell their courses is by really saying, we're going to give you tricks that will help you answer questions quickly. Why? Because it's the easiest and the most tangible way to sell things. You see certain failures and you really say, I didn't have time in the end, and which is why I failed. Am I correct? A lot of you think, hey man, GMAT's a test of speed. You should be able to answer questions as quickly as possible. Why do you think GMAT as an exam that's designed to make you better decision makers, an exam that's designed to really prime you up, or to evaluate whether you're primed up to do an MBA, why would it be a test of speed? I mean, when you go and make a business decision, the guy who makes the fastest decision is not the one who gets rewarded the most, right? I mean, when you think about it, you look at Amazon and you say, man, Jeff Bezos, the reason why he was able to build an upwards of $1 trillion company is not because he makes fast decisions, it's because he makes good long-term decisions. The reason why Apple is what it is because those companies make good long-term decisions. Time is money. But in real life, it's making good decisions is way more important than making fast decisions. Think of all the companies that succeeded and think of all the companies that failed. What you're going to really find out is that the companies that failed, it wasn't that they took too long to make a decision. It was that their thought process isn't good. Okay. So here's something that I will tell you, and I will tell you by putting some context on it. When it comes to verbal, as a company, and you go to GMAT Club's reviews, as a company, you're going to find that e-GMAT delivered 80% of the reviews. There are 11 partners there. One company delivered 80% of all the verbal related reviews. When you look at January data, you're going to find something very, very similar. When it comes to verbal related reviews, upwards of 90% come from e-GMAT. And this is, and you're going to find e-GMAT as the only company that is not talking about timing over there. Just some data for you. Okay. What I'm trying to tell you is, when it comes to your score on the GMAT, timing has about 20% of the impact. Or timing, test taking strategies, and a bunch of these other things, the impact is about 20%. 80% is about ability. And a lot of people think when they're learning, I've got to do this fast. And when they worry about doing this fast, they miss out on critical things, such as how to visualize the conclusion, such as what does this statement mean? Build that ability. That's one thing. The second thing is, if you build that ability, you will not have a problem with timing. The GMAT's such a well-designed exam, you will not face a difficulty. Let me ask another question. How many of you have actually faced an issue? What happened? Hold on. Just 1 second. How many of you have faced an issue where you took 3 minutes to answer a question? Let me just add new poll. Let me just make it short answer. And Just 1 second. Yeah, let me just open the poll. My bad. How many of you have faced a question where 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 you've taken 3 minutes and you're still not sure of the answer? When that happens, another thing that also happens, right? You're doing back and forth between the question stem and the answer choices. When after 3 minutes you're still not sure, don't you also do back and forth between the question stem and the answer choices? You're reading the question stem again and again and again. What is that a symptom of? What the outcome is greater time, but what is that a symptom of? It's a symptom of the fact that in the prompt you did not understand something, right? There was a word that you did not understand, or there was a phrase that you did not understand. There was a place where you had to visualize, you did not visualize. Now, is that a timing problem or is that a visualization problem? It's a visualization problem. So should you be doing things fast or should you be doing things slowly if you were to fix that problem? Yes. To fix timing, go slow. Understand. When you don't understand something, think of it as a learning moment. When you start doing that, you will progressively get faster. And again, remember, I'm not giving you a magic wand here because there is no magic wand. Anyone who says there is a magic wand doesn't know how learning happens in an individual. Okay, there is no magic wand over there. Okay, so here is how you're going to feel as you start doing pre-thinking. Okay, let's say you are at step 1 where your accuracy to answer CR questions is low, your time to answer questions is medium. And this is all relative because for different people, each one of you is going to have a different data point on this chart. But each one of you is going to go through the same journey. The moment you start doing pre-thinking, two things will happen. You will do more questions correct. Your accuracy will go up, but you will also take longer. Why? Because you're deliberately reading things slowly. Okay. And you're going to be like this guy, say, man, I already worry about timing. Why the hell am I doing this? At that point in time, keep faith. As you keep doing that, what's going to happen is you're going to see that a time, and this is a non-linear process, a time will happen 12, 15, 18 arguments, depending on how diligently you do those 12 arguments and where you're starting from. You'd see, man, my accuracy keeps on going up. I'm now solving questions a lot faster. And you can really see this point number 3 is towards the left-hand side of point number 1, which is where you started with, which means you'd be faster, you'd be way more accurate over there. And then you would say, okay, now I understand why pre-thinking works. This is a level 2. And then as you continue doing that, you will continue to improve. Now, what I'll tell you is, yes, just practice doesn't make you perfect. Deliberate practice, once you have the right foundation and once you have the right methods, that is what makes you perfect. So a lot of people think the key to getting 750 is to solve 1,000 questions. What I will tell you is most people who solve 1,000 questions will not score 750. Most people who solve 500 questions, spend way more time solving those 500 questions, are going to get 750 a lot faster. What does it take to go from 1 to 4? 1 week, if you have the foundation. 1 week. Okay. And here is some evidence over there. Okay. One of our former students who said, understand the passage, take your time, equally important, pre-think an answer before going to an answer choice. This one word will have the most impact on your GMAT score. Jim, he was one of our former students. He actually did, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see his success story. You can read his debrief over here. He went from 700 to 770 just by improving his critical reasoning. He says, when it comes to 700 level questions, you have to do pre-thinking. The reason is to understand the logic and not deviate from the key argument when trap or out of scope answer choices show up. This guy recently got into GSP Chicago and Columbia. Okay. There's another guy who says,
Pre-thinking primes the mind. We are constantly on our toes while reading a paragraph, which is RC paragraph or a CR argument. So pre-thinking helps you in both places. And you're also speculating. This is more for RC. What's the direction that the passage will orient, or the logical jump has the author taken? So that's something that is CR. This is RC, and this is CR. So again, it's a skill that's not limited to just assumption questions, or just assumption questions, or just critical reasoning over there. Shiva says, I'm 2 weeks away from the GMAT. Is practicing skills slowly a productive approach in this case? Shiva, do it for a day. You would know. You'd see that improvement right away. How many hours does it take for you to go from level 1 to level 3? About 12 hours. 12 dedicated hours over here. Now, we're going to do a third example in this case. Excuse me. This third one, remember that definition of assumption. Why? Because as you do this as an official question, you're gonna find that multiple answer choices seem to be correct. And at that point, if you understand that definition of what an assumption is, you're going to be able to get to the correct answer with 100% surety. Okay, here are the answer choices over there. Good luck, guys, and I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to solve this question. All right, last 15 seconds, guys. Get those answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. And let's see how many responses did we get. 130 odd responses. Well, 120 odd responses, I believe, over here. And you can see how we polled. Choice E was the most popular choice. Choice B is really popular, as our choices C and D as well. So with that, let's understand this. When you were looking at the answer choices, what was the first thing that struck you? What was the first thing? Okay, they were slightly confused. There was a lot of similarity. They seemed to be attacking the same piece over there. Okay, so let's see how we go about doing this. The conclusion is very clear. It says that, hey, as if we increase that toll, our annual revenue is gonna go up by at least 50% per year over there. Okay, so let's kind of visualize this. Okay, let's visualize this conclusion, and we're saying, hey, if the annual revenue this year was $1 million, again, as I say, whenever there's a comparison, put in numbers. The annual revenue were $1 million, it'll become at least 1.5 million this year or the year after, once that increase happens. So how do we estimate annual revenue? Can you guys tell me? And here is the argument which is there for you. How do you estimate annual revenue? Okay. Now what's the formula? Number of miles, total distance traveled, and cost per mile. And again, you get a clue from this 10 cents per mile toll that's given. So there has to be something on a per mile basis. Why? Because you're given this information. So the annual revenue is toll per mile multiplied by the total number of toll miles. Okay. Don't go over complicated principle into 1 plus price increase or stuff such as that. It's miles divided by how much am I paying per mile. That's basically it. Okay. So what do we know? What do we know from the argument? We're going to increase that toll per mile by 50%. That's something that's given to us. So we ask the same falsification question. Under what circumstances would the annual revenue not increase by 50%, provided that we know that toll per mile has increased by 50%? So under what circumstances? If the total number of toll miles, if that goes down, okay, even by 10 to 15%, okay, that's something. If the total number of toll miles, if that reduces, then you're going to have a problem. It's not going to go up by 50%. Is that clear? The total number of toll miles go down. That's all that we are saying. Now, let's just stop over here. How do we really get to the total number of toll miles? And let me just write this. How do we get total number of toll miles? What's the formula over here? How do we get this? It's a product of two things. It's the number of trips or number of cars. Okay, let's call it trips multiplied by the distance per trip. Right? Average number of cars times average distance. That's a good way to really put this. All right, just to keep this in mind. All right, now the only possible falsifying scenario, as we said, is the total number of miles decreases. The assumption then that comes out as the total number of miles driven does not decrease over here. Okay. Now, a lot of people chose choice B, which is an incorrect answer choice, and I want to make sure why that happened. We're going to go through every answer choice. Choice B says the total number of trips made on the toll highway will not decrease from its current level. So let's say there were 100 trips which were being made. Okay. Now, if that goes to 90, instead of 100, now if we take 90 trips, does it automatically imply that the total number of miles will go down? Does it automatically imply? No. Why? Because despite those 90 trips, if you're spending more time on each trip, okay, which is why, so then the question is, what's the assumption? What's the definition of an assumption? What's the definition of an assumption? Can you guys repeat that? Remember, I asked you to remember the definition. must be true, right? An unstated idea that must be true. Then given what we talked about, is the number of trips remaining the same? Is that a must be true? Is that a must be true? No, it's not a must be true. Why? Because even when you go down from 100 to 90, I can increase the distance traveled per trip. Okay, so it's not necessary that the total number of trips remain the same. Do you guys see that? It's not necessary the total number of trips remain the same. It doesn't satisfy that must be true criteria. This is a great strengthener. It's not a good assumption. Okay. The correct answer, which is choice E, talks about the total distance traveled, which is where if you had just focus on doing the pre-thinking, you would have really said, hey, total number of toll miles, directly talk to the total distance travel. Why? Because the total distance goes down, then yes, we'll have a problem with the conclusion. Why? Because total distance maps directly to the total number of miles. And again, that's the question that we're going to ask. Okay. For those of you who chose choice B, can you see why choice B is wrong, and can you see why choice E is satisfies that must be true condition? Okay. And that's the difference. But remember, I said strengthener versus an assumption. That's something which is there. Let's look at all the answer choices over there. Choice C, average length of the trip. If average length goes down, what can compensate for it? If average length goes down, what will compensate? Number of trips, yes. B and C are complementary. They just attack only a part of the problem. Both of them are not must be true. The number of drivers consistently avoid. The same reason choice D is incorrect, If more people start to ignore, so what? The people who go there could actually be be traveling longer. Okay. Why not choice A? Choice A actually is completely irrelevant. Choice A says, choice A doesn't talk about the annual revenue. Choice A says, what if they need more money? Do we care about whether they need more money? Do we care about that? No. That's not what the highway commissioner is claiming. The highway commissioner is claiming the claim is about the increase in revenue. It could happen that increase in revenue may not be enough. So what? That's not what he claimed. Okay. People who chose choice A. None of this is rocket science, guys. I think the way what you're really probably getting out of this is, as long as you understand the argument, none of this is rocket science. Was this a hard question? Yes. No, the accuracy for this question was 47% for this group. Okay. Why C? Why can't C be a choice? So C cannot be because it doesn't satisfy the must be true criteria. Let me just give you a parallel example, and let me get my keyboard, and I'm going to get a notes pane over here. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay. Couldn't understand the difference between choice B and E. Okay, let's kind of do that over here. And I'm gonna, and once you understand B, you're gonna understand everything. So what is must be true? Must be true means something has to be true. Otherwise, my conclusion breaks. Okay. Now, let's see what choice B says over here, and very quickly. Choice B says the total number of trips. So what was our pre-thinking? The pre-thinking was, what was our pre-thinking for people who are confused in either choices B or C? What was our pre-thinking? What should not go down? The total distance. Everyone remembers that? The total distance traveled should not go down. Everyone remembers that? Yes, no? Yes. Okay. What does choice B say? Choice B says total number of trips will not go down. Now, does this mean when you evaluate choice B, does this mean that the total distance will go down? Yes or no? Does this mean that? The answer is no. Why? Okay. The average length of the trip can compensate. Okay. People who are confused with choice B. Is that clear? Right. If, and the same reason goes for choice C as well. Choice C actually talks about the number of drivers. Choice C talks about the average length of the trip. If average length of the trip goes down from 50 miles to 40, what can compensate? What can compensate? The total number of trips. That could go up. Right? Same thing with choice D. If the number of drivers who avoid goes up, let's say there were 100 drivers who avoided, now 110 avoid. What would compensate? Average length of the trip of people who are actually on the highway, or even more trips by people who take the highway. Okay. So that's where visualizing not just the conclusion, but also the answer choices would help. Gopal says if the question didn't have a per mile condition in choice, then would B be correct? Gopal, if it were dependent on the distance, then number of trips would not be the correct way. Either way, if it were distance dependent, if I'm charging on a per distance basis, if I were charging on a per trip basis, then of course, yes, choice B is a much better option, or only choice B would have been correct. Then choice E would not have been correct. Okay. All right. Gargi, I don't know what trilateral diagrams are, and I won't be teaching you because this is not rocket science. But let's kind of go about this for those of you who wanted that study plan, and then we'll go towards the last two questions in this webinar. Again, when you build that study plan, make sure you get these precise estimates. Make sure you have those milestones defined, and make sure you have the metrics. So when you click on this, you're going to really see a bunch of case studies that people like you would identify problems that people like you faced, and we'll talk about how have we solved these problems over here. And as you click on this, you can really see that. And accordingly, if a certain case study resonates more with you, go through that. That way we'll assign the appropriate mentor. Now, as you do that, choose a time slot. And I don't know if time slots are available, frankly. I don't know how many you got taken up early on, but if they are available, make sure you provide good answers to these questions, because that kind of makes that entire conversation a lot more productive. We can help prepare, and if need be, we can send you some more clarifications up front. So yeah, with that, if there are slots available, you can still book that study plan over here. If you already are an e-GMAT student, you have access to this tool, you know how to use this tool. Make sure you attend these onboarding sessions. They're once per week, they're every Friday over here. Okay. And then you make sure you attend that test readiness over there. Okay. Um, and if you have questions about 3 stages of learning, make sure you put those questions to your customer success champions over there. Would you have that study plan available post this? You'd be able to take it with you if you need to. Okay. And ideally, you should have taken a mock test before this. So take the Sigma X mock test if need be. Okay. Anuj, your question, should you be focused on scholarly name or OG medium hard question? I don't know where you are, so I don't know if you should be solving questions at this point. So I need some more information towards the end. Let's talk about this. Let's now get through our last two questions, questions 4 and 5. This is where we go into that application mode. We're going to solve these questions uh, uh, in a quiz mode. So here is the first question. It's called RDS Technologies. This is a difficult question. The way we're going to do this is I want you guys to choose not answered. So I want about 70 people to say not answered. And then when you choose an answer choice other than not answered, that way I know you are done. And that's when I would call time. Okay. 60 people have chosen not answered. 67, 68, 60, 70, 71. So in this next question, visualize the conclusion. Pause and understand what the argument's saying before you look at the argument. Do not look at the answer choices before you do pre-thinking. They will mess you up if you look at the answer choices. Just a warning. Okay, here is the question. So another 40 seconds. All right. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. Difficult question. I wanted you to go slow. I wanted you to make sure that you get this. You can see how you guys polled over here. There was a couple of questions in the Q&A pod, really good questions that I want to just talk about here. It said, should you be taking the same time that you're taking over here um, to solve these questions? The answer is no. You should be taking longer. Your focus should be to visualize, to get everything right. Remember, you're still learning the process. In the same way, when you shouldn't be solving problems that you are supposed to solve post your MBA now or even in the first semester. Why? Because you've not been trained completely to do that. So this is a learning exercise. You're going to take longer to do this, and that's okay as long as you follow the steps over here. With that, let's get to not answered. I want about 40 of you, 70 of you to say not answered before I show the next question. Okay, so 70 folks, I need you guys to say not answered. 67, 68. All right, perfect. Let me remove broadcast results. Here is your next question. Good luck, guys. All right, I have another 25 seconds, but 70% of the class is actually 78% of the class is done. So another 10 seconds now. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. Again, thank you. Really good participation in this case over here. About 121 people responded to this one. You can see choice D was the most popular choice. Choice E, I think, is the next most popular. Choice C was quite popular as well. Both these questions are beautiful questions, and we're going to analyze each of these questions in detail, and we're going to apply the same methods that we talked about. But having said that, you're going to learn something new in each of these questions. You're going to learn about an aspect of critical reasoning that you need to focus on. You're going to learn where you falter, why you falter, or if you're doing things well, if you got them correct, you're going to give yourself a pat on the back and really know what you're doing right. And it's going to be a great comparative assessment. So this is your first question, difficult question. I'm sure many of you were scratching your head when you saw the argument. How many of you were scratching your head over here when you saw this? It was, yes. The reason why this was tough and the reason why you guys felt you needed more time is because this question, this argument has a lot of information. And if you did not write information down right from the get-go, you would have had to go through this multiple times. Each one of you is going to be able to come up with assumptions. I know this because I've done this session 100 times. I've solved this question 100 times. And every time, once I make you understand the argument, you guys are able to come up with not one, but multiple correct answers. Okay. But the reason why you struggled originally is because you did not write things down. Okay. Let's kind of just start visualizing the conclusion over here. The conclusion says the number of Erlanders receiving special program information did not increase significantly between 94 and 96. Okay. So let's visualize this. Can someone visualize this for me? What is this conclusion saying? Does it? Let's say stayed the same. So visualization goes to that next level. What it's saying is if there were 1,000 Verlanders in 1994, and you can really see this is a radio question, it's an old question, then more or less it's going to be 1,000 Verlanders, it could be 1,010 in 96 as well. Right? Right? This is not talking about the number of radios. This is not talking about the number of stations. This is just saying, just visualize the conclusion. And we are only talking about this people who got this special program information, SPI. Is that clear with regards to the conclusion, this visualization? Right? Now, there are two things over here in this visualization. One is it's about the difference between 94 and 96. Okay. The second is it is about special program information. Only that. We are not concerned with any other kind of programs. Can you see that observation over here? Can you see that? Right? Now, if you visualize just this, I want to focus your attention on choice D, D for delta. Okay. Choice D, and again, we're going to go through a proper rigor, but just read choice D. Choice D talks about any programming. Did the conclusion talk about any programming? Okay. Choice D talks about what happens in 96. The conclusion talks about a comparison between 94 and 96. If you just understood the conclusion, were able to visualize that conclusion, even then you'd say, hey, choice D probably can't be correct given what I understand from what the conclusion is talking about. It's not talking about the right entity. It's not doing that comparison. It doesn't seem to be correct. Okay. So just trying to tell you what visualization aids you with, what segmenting your understanding aids you with. Okay, so let's now understand this entire argument over here. So what is the author saying? The author is saying that, hey, the number of people who, if 1,000 people received special programs in information in 94, 1,000 received SPI or special programs information in 1996. Let us see, why does the author say that? There are two things that have happened between 94 and 96. The number of receiving radios, RDS equipped radios, receiving radios did not change a whole lot between 94 and 96. If there were 1,000 radios in 94, there were 1,000 radios in 96. If there were 500 in 94, there were 500 in 96. But the number of transmitting stations went a lot. These are the broadcasting stations that are there. They more than doubled. This is 250 to 600. Think of it as more than doubled. We're doing the opposite. Here you're given the number. I'm kind of just visualizing this. Okay. So two things have happened. One is that, hey, you have more transmitting stations, more broadcasting stations. And the second is you have the same number of receiving radios. Now, you see this word, however, over here, this word. What this seems is the reason why there's however that's connecting these two statements is because they seem somewhat contradictory. All right. Okay. Which means that these two statements seem to go against each other. Now, what does statement one say? It adds context. It really says that, hey, if you need the special program information, you need both. You need, hey, a radio with which you should have in your house or wherever you're listening, that is an RDS radio, and then you need the transmitting station to also be an RDS transmitting station. So just this logical structure, the context says to receive RDS programming, you need both. You need to be in range of an RDS station. You also need an RDS radio. Between 1994 and 96, the number of RDS radios kind of remained the same. The number of RDS stations, they went up a lot. Based on this, this is what my author is saying. The number of people receiving special program information did not change a whole lot. Okay. So here is my falsification question. Under what conditions will there be a significant increase in the number of people receiving RDS programming? Remember, I'm breaking my conclusion. Given that I have very few additional radios, given that I have a lot more stations. What are the scenarios in which my conclusion will break down? Can you come up with some scenarios? Okay, if in 1994 there were some radios that were not covered and these additional stations now cover them, can you come up with one other answer? If number of people per radio go up, if we start putting these radios in Starbucks versus taking them from houses and start putting them in Starbucks, then also, the conclusion will break down, right? If more people start using the radio, in 94 maybe people had the radio, but again, that using doesn't matter. It's more about receiving. So they were still receiving over there. Okay. No, those are not tough assumptions. You guys came up with these assumptions right now. You guys came up with these. Once you understood, it took you 30 seconds to come up with this. Once you understood the argument. How much time did you spend on this slide before the correct answers came? No other means other than RDS to broadcast this info? No, that was given to you. That can't be an assumption. That would not be new information. When you say to receive RDS, you need these radios, which means there is no other way. So that's not new information, which is why new information part is really important. We'll look at what the correct answer is. But now when you look at it, does this argument seem complex? No, it's not complex. There's a lot of information there. If you organize that information, the answer should jump out to you right away. It's just that you couldn't organize that information. Okay. So what are the possible scenarios? These are the possible scenarios in which the conclusion breaks down. If these new stations now cover areas where there was no coverage earlier, but where people did have the right kind of radio, so now you increase the coverage, you reach people who had the right kind of radio, or if people per radio go up. Okay. So these are the cases in which my conclusion breaks down. What are my falsifying scenarios, or what are my assumptions? The new stations should not increase the coverage significantly. The people per radio remain about the same. Assumptions make sense? Falsification scenarios you guys came up with, the assumptions that we got from these, they make sense? Yes. They just are saying none of those falsification scenarios happen. Answer choices. The correct answer, choice A, is our correct answer over here. We're going to discuss each and every answer choice. So if you chose another answer choice, you're worried, where did I make a mistake? Hold your doubt, and we're going to address that. But this is how you guys polled. 20% of the class chose choice A, 20% of the class got it right. Choice B was very popular, and choice D was also popular. We're going to see why those are wrong. Okay. Let's look at this. Few, if any, of the RDS stations that began broadcasting after 94. Few, if any, means almost none. Okay. This is my correct answer. Choice A for alpha. Okay. That began broadcasting after 94. These are the new radio stations. Broadcast to people with RDS equipped radios. It means people who had RDS equipped radios living in areas not previously reached. What does this mean? Increase the coverage of RDS programming. This choice is saying is almost none of the new radio stations increase the coverage of RDS programming. Let's kind of do our negation test over here. Negated statement is at least some radio stations increase coverage. If radio stations increase coverage, then can we really say that, hey, the number of people receiving special program information in 94 remain the same in 96? No, we can't say that. My conclusion breaks down, which means I passed the negation test, which means this is my correct answer. Okay, regardless of which answer choice you chose, you can see this is in line with the first pre-thinking that we came in. Very complex statement, but the essence of this is this piece over here, and you can see how the negation test is applied, which is why this is the correct answer. Okay, so choice A is the correct one. Okay, now let's go to choice B. Now, can I again trouble you with that question? What is the definition of an assumption? What is the definition of an assumption? An unstated idea that must be true. Okay, choice B is in this question is in along the lines of in some ways choice B of the highway miles question. So let's kind of look at this. Okay, choice B says in 1996 most, again let's start visualizing, most, let's call it 70%. Okay, 70% of the Worldlanders who lived within the listening area of an RDS station already had a radio equipped to receive RDS. What is my conclusion? What is my conclusion? The number of people between 94 and 96 remain the same, right? That's my conclusion. Number of people receiving that special program information do not change a whole lot between 94 and 96. Now, let me ask you this. Is it required for that conclusion that 70% of the people own an RDS radio in 94 and 70% own that RDS radio in 96? Can the conclusion not remain true if 20% owned an RDS radio in 94 and 20% owned an RDS radio in 96? Is it required that 70% or 60% or 51% own that? Is that a must requirement? Yes, no? No, it's not a must requirement. The conclusion is going to hold true even if 20% of people had an RDS radio in 94 and the same 20% had an RDS or another 20%, which could be a different 20%, but as long as it's 20%, it doesn't matter. You don't need it to be most. Okay, so is this a must be true answer choice? Is that a must be true answer choice? No, it's not. Remember, the conclusion is about the change in number, not the absolute number in 94 or the absolute number in 96. Right? Let's look at choice C. Equipping a radio with RDS technology does not decrease the station's listening area. What kind of programming is is the conclusion about? What kind of programming is my conclusion about? Special programming. Without RDS technology, without this technology, can a station broadcast RDS or special programming? No. So what is the range of special programming from an RDS station when it doesn't have RDS technology? Simple mathematics. What is the range of special programming from a radio station that doesn't have RDS technology? 0. Yes. So when we are talking about a station's listening area, are we talking about special programming or is the impact on non-special programming? Is it on special or non-special? No, it's non-special. Right? Because the range for special was 0 before you equipped it. Right? There was no range. Let me draw a parallel for you. Okay. Cell phones. This is very simple, very similar to cell phones. If you need 5G to be able to broadcast movies in real time, and you equip a broadcasting tower with 5G technology, which in turn reduces its range. Can you really say that, hey, broadcasting, because of adding 5G technology to that tower, I reduce the number of movies that were being broadcasted? No. Why? Because without 5G technology, there were no movies being broadcasted. Right? What may have been reduced is the number of emails that were being transmitted through that. That's okay. But not with regards to number of movies. So from the context of our conclusion, which is where we are only concerned about special programming, this is irrelevant. This only is relevant to non-special programming. Do you get that? Because the range of special program information is 0 if you don't equip a station with that technology. Read this again. What is the range of a station if it doesn't have RDS technology? What is the range let's kind of look at this. What is the conclusion about? What kind of programming is the conclusion about? Special, right? Right? It's only about special. Now, what is the range What is that range? 0, right? So when you read choice C, so which means the range can't go less than 0. Again, any radio engineers, don't go to negative range, please. But in real world, range can't go less than 0. So when you read choice C, what kind of programming is the author implying? Answer choice implying. Not stating, but implying. When it comes to range reduction, is it special? You have two options. Special or non-special. What kind of programming is the answer choice implying? It's non-special, right? Do we care about non-special? No. Conclusion has nothing to do with non-special. Okay? If you understood this, you're going to understand choice D too. Choice D says, in 1996 were landers who did not own radios to receive RDS programming. Do we care about people who did not own any such radios? Oh my, what did I do to my poll? Do we, let me bring that poll again. Do we care about those people who don't have the right kind of radios? No, we don't. Could not receive any programming. Do we care about any programming? No, we don't. We don't care about those people. Those are not in our. So again, completely irrelevant. Okay. It's like you're not going to care about people applying to Harvard who are not even, taking either the GMAT or the GRE. Right? You can't apply to Harvard without a GMAT or a GRE. You're not going to compare your profile to those. Again, you understand the answer choice. You visualize the answer choice. Remember the third term in the third thing where we had in the visualize box early on. It was about visualizing the answer choices. Visualize those answer choices. Really important. Choice E. RDS radio station did not offer the same type of programming. Again, don't care about the type of programming. Okay, we care about whether they receive that special program information or not. So, what did we learn from this question? Probably the most challenging assumption question that you're going to really see even if you're getting a V51. What did we learn from it? What did we learn? What's your takeaway? Take your time. Watch the recording. I'm not going to go over choice A, but watch it. Take it as a challenge. I'm going to give you the PDF. You will get it. Trust me. Pay attention. Focus on that conclusion. Visualize. Do not rush through things. And you can go anywhere and ask someone, how can you teach me how to rush through this and answer this question with your tricks and do such questions consistently? You can't. Now this one, let me bring in your poll over here, tell you how did you respond to this one. Shelby will refuse. Here is my poll. And we're going to be very quick about this because you guys did better on this one. Choice D is my correct answer. 44% of you got this right. But let's kind of look at why this is correct. So here is what's happening in this question. We're going to take visualization to that next level. Okay. So what happened last year? Last year, we collected a bunch of refuse. This is refuse. And this refuse, we did not send to recycling. We burned everything. Okay, this is incineration over here. Let's assume each garbage can over here is what equivalent to one truck. Okay, how many trucks did we burn last year? Can you count the number of garbage cans? 10, right? Now, what does this mean given the information in the passage about next year? How many trucks are we going to send for incineration next year? If we collect the same amount of garbage, it's 5 trucks. Now, here is the challenge to you. If instead of collecting the same amount of garbage, if I collect 10 times as much garbage, if I collect 10x as much garbage, my question to you is, how many trucks do you think will I send for incineration if I collect 10 times as much garbage? Okay, if this garbage collected is 10 times as much, how many trucks will I send for incineration? And this is a read the argument before you answer the question. How many trucks will I send for incineration if I collect 10 times as much garbage as I did last year? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Let me broadcast the results. You can see 28% of you say 5, and 5 is the correct answer, but everyone else is wrong. Only 28% of you got the right answer. Why do we say 5, and why is it that what's that language that makes this question such a beautiful question? Let's look at this. This year, city services will separate for recycling enough refuse to reduce the number of truckloads to half of last year's number. What they're really saying is, regardless of how much garbage we collect, I'm only going to send half as many trucks as I sent last year for incineration. Read this. This year we'll separate enough refuse to reduce, to is an outcome word, to reduce the number of truckloads to half of last year's number. Read this once again. This is a fact that's given to you. That's not the idea. This is a fact. This is the author is telling you this is going to happen. Okay, you can't refute it. This is a fact. Okay, that statement makes the difference. Yes, and that's the beauty of language. That's what you need to slow down and understand and comprehend. Once you build that skill, speed would happen automatically. That's how you get fast. You build that skill to read and understand, to understand those keywords, to see, okay, there's a comparison over here. I need to visualize that comparison. That makes the difference. That's the difference between a guy who scores a 750 versus someone who gets stuck at a 650, or more precisely, someone who gets stuck at a 60th percentile versus someone who gets to that 90th percentile. Okay. So what's going on over here? Last year, everything was burned. All right. That burning, incineration, created a large quantity of ash. Now we want to reduce that ash, and the city services is going to separate enough refuse so that we only send half the trucks. Okay. So the conclusion is, hey, under what scenario, what is required for the ash to be generated to be half of what was generated last year, given that we are only going to send half as many trucks. The same falsification question. Once you formulate that falsification question, what's the only falsification scenario? If the ash per truckload generated is higher, right? That's the scenario in which my conclusion will break down, which means my assumption is that ash per truckload should be similar to or lower than what it was last year. That's your assumption. That's the only way that's the only thing that you're required, because you're only going to get half as many truckloads. Everyone clear with that pre-thinking process? Perfect. Let's look at choices. Choice says this year no material that city services separate for recycling will be incinerated. Now this is an example of one of the few questions where an information that's given that can be inferred from the argument is there in the answer choices. It's a must be true statement. Yes, if you incinerate stuff that you're going to recycle, the entire argument falls apart. But you already know you're not going to do that because your argument tells that, which means this provides no new information. Okay, the argument tells you whatever is going to be incinerated, you're not going to be recycled. Is not going to be incinerated. Why? Because it's going to separate for recycling enough refuse so that you only get half as many trucks. Okay, which means if you're separating for recycling, you're not going to incinerate it. Okay. Choice B talks about cost. We don't care about cost. Okay. Choice C says refuse collected will contain a larger proportion. Do we care about proportion given that we are only going to send half as many trucks? Do we care about proportion? Yes, no? Do we care about proportion, guys? Yes, no? No, we don't. Okay. If I get 5 trucks, I get 5 trucks versus 10 last year. Choice D, in line with our pre-thinking, compares the amount of ash generated per truckload, which means that it ensures that we are not going to stuff those trucks with so much refuse that each truckload generates way more ash. Okay. You can see the negation test being applied over here. And choice E, that is there, a lot of people chose this, talks about the total quantity of refuse. We already discussed this, guys. The total quantity doesn't matter. Why? Because even if we collect 10 times as much refuse, we are only going to send half as many truckloads. Okay, doesn't matter. Why? Because we send half as many truckloads. All right. what did we learn from this question? What did you want? You want me to show you the polls? How did you guys poll? I can show the poll over here. Shelby will refuse. Here is how you guys polled over here. What did you learn from this? What were the takeaways depending on how many you have? Again, read carefully. You can see the same thing start to repeat. Read carefully. Understand what an assumption is. Create that falsification scenario. Visualize. Yes. How many of these are tricks? None. These are skills that you build. Okay. And that's what I want you to take away. And if you got both questions right but still not confident, which means you are on the right path. That's good. Okay. People who excel don't give themselves a pat on the back very quickly because they constantly want to improve. That's a good trait. Okay. So the key thing is, this wasn't rocket science. Was any of this rocket science? No, it didn't feel like rocket science, right? It was simple logic. As long as you followed the method, you would have gotten the answer. And if you visualize, if you ask the pre-thinking question, you're going to be able to do this better. You're going to be able to do it faster. Okay. So what are the next steps? Go to the free trial. Go through introduction to assumption, logical gap, two entities. Now the beauty of this is these are very directed argument structures, which means as you go through them, you get better at each one of these. Each one of these files is going to be about 45 minutes or so. So budget that time over there. Then apply this to these practice questions. Okay. If you need help with boldface, that's something that you have over here as well. If you are a paid student, this is your assumption module. Go through it if you've not gone through it. Again, you see this is the part of the free trial. You have 3 more argument types over here in assumption. You have 2 more application files. You have 2 more practice files over here. So again, as you go through this, we are going to make sure that every trick, every dangling modifier, every means of confusing your visualization is covered over here. So go through this, and you're going to find in a week you'd become a skilled pre-thinker. Okay. Again, understand the integration between concepts and application and qualifying exercises. You have concepts here, application here, another level of application, and qualifying exercises here. When you learn concepts, we evaluate you. Use that feedback. When we teach you application, we evaluate you. Again, this was an application-oriented session where we gave you feedback on every question. You probably get 5 to 7 times as much feedback in the webinar. You have qualifying exercises. Those again have detailed solutions. So in the unlikely event you miss something, you know where you're missing them. You know where you're making a mistake and why you're making a mistake, and so that you can do that correction right then and there. Okay, this is comprehensive, just to really tell you. When you compare it to any other resource, this is comprehensive. But it doesn't mean it's going to take longer. Why? Because frankly, when you go through this, you won't have to study anything else. This is all e-GMAT questions. These are not official questions. None of these is an official question over here. And here are people who've done it, and I'm going to giving you examples of people not just getting to that 99 percentile, but doing it in about 20 days or so. So for you say, how long does it take over there? It takes, a few days to get there. Now she already started at a V32, which means she had a foundation. Okay, but it is about focus. It is about doing the same thing consistently that leads to improvement. Okay. There's another guy who thought he was very good at it, and he taught physics at an undergraduate level, and again, you guys experience this where something that he experienced as well. It says language has a way of manipulating your mind, and GMAT's really good at using the language to fool you, to make you think that you got the right answer. Some of you actually felt that, right? So it's just spend those 10 seconds or so to make sure you understand what the question is telling you over there. Again, do these things and excel in CR in about 10 days, and be slow over there when you're going through the assumption module, because if you go quickly, if you don't revise um, as you go through this, you might end up going through the entire module. You probably will still not have the level of confidence that we want you. You would improve, but you won't improve to the extent that I want you to improve to. Okay. With that, I'd love to get some feedback on the webinar, and we are at that point where we are doing open-ended Q&A. So if you can put some feedback on uh, 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 over there, that would be good. Let me share the session handout. As you download the PDF, you should be able to click on every link over here. Where can you find those materials? Log into your e-GMAT account. You'd get there. And again, this would be a good time to register for the free webinar tomorrow. We have that quant workshop, and then the SC session next week. If you like this session, you're going to love the SC one. You'd have probably twice as many aha moments there. Here again, you have the link to the study plan. You can book that. You have the link to the SigmaX mock test, and then you can see read some stories as well. And again, as I mentioned, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We upload multiple success stories. It's the largest collection of success stories, and these are unedited interviews, 30-minute long, where people talk about their journeys. If this webinar is CR1, what is CR2? Well, we used to have a bunch of webinars. Again, for our paid students, we might reinstantiate those, so that say we used to have up to CR10. It's just that, when people started going through the new revamped CR course, they kind of said, hey, we already need this, so we don't need this. We already got it in the course itself. And then go through that and you'd experience the same. How long is the SigmaX mock test? It has quant and verbal, a full quant section, a full verbal section. So yeah. So it's going to be about 2.5 hours or so. Okay, if you've already gone through the assumption module, but you're still struggling with assumption questions, what do you do? Go back, look at the feedback provided. There are gaps, clearly, Harsh. And so revise those places. Make sure, look at how many notes you've done. Understand the thought process that someone's gone through. Here's something that I want you to do before that. Click on click on Jim Yee's success story. Watch that and see, because he actually struggled with this. He went through it. He didn't really internalize it in his first attempt, and he got a V30, 35 percentile in his critical reasoning. Then I gave him the same suggestion. In 15 days, he was able to go from the 35th percentile in critical reasoning to that 97th percentile in critical reasoning. So after completion of the 1-year MBA program from B schools such as IMA or ISB, what are the chances to get a job in the UK or the USA? There are very few placements that directly put you there. So if you're doing that 1-year MBA from ISB, you'd get into an organization. As you progress further, depending on the organization, they may place you through an L1 visa. So what are the chances? Pretty good chance, if not right away, but maybe 4 or 5 years post your MBA, if you move towards that direction. Okay. We have examples of students who've done this, by the way. So yeah. But if you want to be in the US or in the UK, I would recommend do your MBA over there. It's cheaper because you get scholarships. Does SigmaX mock have integrated reasoning? No, it does not. Okay. Any other question, guys? Again, if you've registered for the quant workshop, I'm going to hide this one over here. For those of you who are unable to download the PDF, if you are on a mobile device, you might be unable to download the PDF. We will send the recording in an email later on today. It would also be on our YouTube channel, by the way, the recording. So in that same email, we will send a link to download it. The same. Can I suggest some V schools, Pooja? That's an hour-long discussion. Um, Again, if you go to our YouTube channel, watch some of these success stories. In probably half of them, I talk about a framework as to how to choose this. In fact, I'm going to share a video with you with one of our former students who did an excellent job with this. So let me get that video over and just give me 1 second. This is about a guy who actually got $500,000 worth of scholarships. So there's a lot to learn from it, from how he approached. Hello everyone. Yeah, this is my voice, and you'd be able to see me as you do this as well. So here is where you can watch his interview, and this is, he talks about how he got rejected by 16 schools when he didn't have as high a GMAT score. Then he got 5 full fellowships. So imagine 16 rejections to 5 full scholarships, and then he talks about how he chose the business schools he wanted to apply to, how he attempted, how he created a strategy around all of this. Then he talks about how he navigated through the business school, how he got a job at Amazon in the US. Do we have a course on integrated reasoning? Yes, we have the world's most comprehensive course on integrated reasoning. It comes with all our packages. You're in the revision A and revision B. How much time will it take to get to that 770? Santosh, you have to hit those metrics. It depends on the diligence. I mean, I have to look at your account before I can tell you. Each individual is different, or your GMAT strategy expert has probably already told you how much time it will take to, if you're in that revision A or revision B process, which is a correction process within the e-GMAT platform for people who, when they go through the course, if you miss out on certain portions, if you don't take feedback into account right when you're learning, that's when we recommend a revision A. If you finish the first mock and you're wondering how should you go, should you take the concept file route or talk to someone from the team? So again, if you finish your first mock, if you first create your PSP, understand the 3 stages of learning. For the rule of thumb with regards to 3 stages of learning is, actually, you know what? I'm going to share something with you. This is a recording of our onboarding session that we do every week. Hold on. If you get asked that question in the Q&A pod, I'd be extremely happy to share that recording. Because it's easier for me. So here is the recording in the, so Dhaval, here is a recording that you should be seeing. It should be a Wistia link. So in this, we talk about various case studies and answer this. And you'd also see our customer success team members. We have 4 people dedicated to just making sure that you succeed. They work full time in doing that. That's their only job. Are there scholarships for PhD? There are, yes. Okay. All right, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was a pleasure hosting you guys, and I'll look forward to seeing you on e-GMAT.com tomorrow, either on the platform or in the session tomorrow. Thank you, and have a good evening. What are the chances of extending GMAT online test dates? I think it will be. My contact at GMAC has said there's a very high likelihood that we're extending it beyond 20th of February, if that's what you're asking. So yes, you'd be able to do that, Akshay.